Welcome. We're going to discuss ineffective prevention strategies and how to make them effective. There truly is a science behind prevention. In this webinar, we will find out why people use ineffective prevention and how we can guide them to use more effective prevention strategies. So, what is effective prevention? Why do well-meaning people use ineffective prevention strategies? And how do we approach these well-meaning people to educate them about effective prevention? First, we need to make sure that we are all on the same page with our definition of prevention. The Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services defines prevention as focusing on preventing and delaying the onset of behavioral health problems. This can apply to all health problems, not just substance use. Prevention services are a planned sequence of culturally appropriate, science-driven strategies intended to facilitate attitude and behavior change for individuals and/or communities. One thing to notice in that is that it is beyond just knowledge of the health problem or consequences. These services are meant to change behavior by teaching skills and changing attitudes. This is the continuum of care, and it shows where prevention fits within the whole continuum. Promotion, the first one, is simply knowledge-based and not skills-based. Treatment and recovery, on the other side, both occur after a health problem has been identified. Prevention sits right in the middle and can be split into 3 different audiences. A universal prevention strategy is one that is designed to reach the entire population without regard to individual risk factors and are intended to reach a very large audience. The program that is provided to everyone in the population, such as a school or a community. An example would be a universal prevention intervention for substance use, which includes substance abuse education using school-based curricula for all children within the school district. Selective prevention strategies target subgroups of the general population that are determined to be at higher risk for substance use. Recipients of selected prevention strategies are known to have specific risks for substance abuse and are recruited to participate in the prevention effort because of that group's profile. Examples of the selected prevention programs for substance abuse include special groups for children of substance abusing parents or families who live in high crime or impoverished areas, and also mentoring programs aimed at children with school performance or behavioral problems. An indicated prevention intervention is to identify individuals who are experiencing early signs of substance abuse and other related problem behaviors associated with substance abuse and target them with special programs. The individuals identified at this stage through experimenting, though they may be just experimenting, have yet not reached the point where they have a clinical diagnosis of substance abuse. Indicated prevention approaches are used for individuals who may or may not be abusing substances, but who exhibit risk factors such as school failure, interpersonal social problems, delinquency, and other antisocial behaviors, and psychological problems such as depression and suicidal behavior, which all increase their chances of developing a drug abuse problem. In the field of substance abuse, an example of an indicated prevention intervention would be a substance abuse program for high school students who are experiencing a number of problem behaviors, including truancy, failing academic grades, suicidal ideation, and early signs of substance abuse. So, what is ineffective prevention? Some of the things that might be considered ineffective are things like a one-time only presentation, where someone comes in and talks to the whole group one time. This would be giving knowledge only, and there's no skill building within this. Alternatives alone would also be another one. This is doing an alcohol and drug-free alternative activity, and while that is great, it's not as effective as if that's the only option that you're doing for prevention. Scare tactics tend to impart fear for the consequences of a behavior. So the kind of things that might fall in here are mock crashes, sensationalized posters or billboards, talks from someone in recovery about their struggle, a Grim Reaper Day, or scared straight programs. None of these really teach skills, and sometimes they can have the opposite effect of what we are intending. Some further data on scare tactics shows the following. So fear may change your attitude and intention, but not your behavior. Therefore, you may indicate that you intend to change your behavior, but you don't. A meta-analysis of over 100 studies on scare tactics found the following. Fear appeals are more effective for one-time only behavior versus repeated behaviors. That means that fear might get someone to do a screening for a health problem, but won't get them to do any subsequent change of that behavior. We've talked about what prevention is and what ineffective prevention looks like. So now we're going to look at what effective prevention is. The Center for Substance Abuse Prevention, or CSAP, has given us a menu of effective prevention strategies. Just like having multiple tools to create a desk will make it easier, you should use multiple strategies in your prevention work. Now we will go through each one and talk about what it means. Information dissemination. This strategy provides awareness and knowledge of the nature and extent of alcohol, tobacco, and drug abuse and use and addiction, and their effects on individuals, families, and communities. Information dissemination is characterized by one-way communication. So that's from the source to the audience with limited contact between the two. So some examples of this might be an information resource center, resource directories, media campaigns, brochures, or PSAs on radio or TV, health fairs, and information lines. The second strategy is education. This strategy involves two-way communication and is distinguished from the information dissemination strategy by the fact that interaction between the educator and the facilitator and the participants is the basis of its activities. So activities under this strategy aim to affect critical life and social skills, including decision-making, refusal skills, critical analysis like of media messages, and systemic judgment abilities. So some of the examples that might fall under education would be classroom and/or small group sessions, parenting and family management classes, peer leader or helper programs, education programs for youth groups, or children of substance abusers groups. Another strategy is alternatives. This strategy provides for the participation of target populations in activities that exclude alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs. The assumption is that constructive and healthy activities offset the attraction to or otherwise meet the needs usually filled by alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs, and would therefore minimize a participant's use of substances. Examples of activities conducted and methods used for this strategy include, but are not limited to, drug-free dances and parties, youth and adult leadership activities, community drop-in centers, and community service activities. The environmental strategy establishes or changes written and unwritten community standards, codes, and attitudes, thereby influencing incidence and prevalence of abuse of alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs used in the general population. This strategy is divided into two subcategories to permit distinction between activities which center on legal and regulatory initiatives and those that relate to the service and action-oriented initiatives. Examples of activities conducted and methods used for this strategy shall include, but are not limited to, promoting the establishment or review of the alcohol, tobacco, and drug use, policies that might be in your schools, technical assistance to communities to maximize local enforcement, procedures governing availability and distribution of alcohol, tobacco, and other drug use, modifying alcohol and tobacco advertising practices, such as where advertising is placed in stores or in the community, and product pricing strategies. Community-based process is a strategy aimed to enhance the ability of the community to be more effectively provide prevention and treatment services for alcohol, tobacco, and drug abuse disorders. Activities in this strategy include organizing, planning, enhancing efficacy and effectiveness of services, implementation, interagency collaboration, coalition building, and networking. Some examples might be Community and volunteer training, such as neighborhood action training, training of key people in systems, and staff and officials training. Systemic planning, multi-agency coordination and collaboration, assessing services and funding, and community team building. The last strategy is problem identification and referral. This strategy aims at identification of those who indulged in illegal, age-inappropriate use of tobacco or alcohol, and those individuals who have indulged in the first use of illicit drugs, in order to assess if the behavior can be reversed through education. It should be noted, however, that this strategy does not include any activity designed to determine if the person is in need of treatment. Examples of activities conducted and methods used for this strategy would be employee assistance programs, student assistance programs, and DUI or DWI education programs. So why do well-meaning people use ineffective prevention? We know that there is a science behind prevention in ways that work more effectively than others. So there can be many reasons that people might not use the most effective prevention. The view of prevention in the media is one. People see a lot of scare tactics in the media. An activity might tug on people's heartstrings, such as a mom telling the story of her addicted child. It may be political. People in higher positions may have good intentions but not have the knowledge, and they can strong-arm others to follow their lead. There may be money involved. Sometimes those people who have money for prevention activities don't have the knowledge that we have. Or just simple lack of knowledge. Some people just don't realize what effective prevention is, and that's where we come into play. So how do we approach these well-meaning people to educate them about effective prevention? Do we have to completely shut down their input? If there are community members who want to be involved, we do not want to completely shut them out of the process. So begin to try to educate them on effective prevention. Explain the CSAP strategies. Send them information on effective prevention programming. But ultimately, you may be faced with difficult situations where you need to increase the effectiveness of prevention. Let's look at a couple of situations where we might have to do just that. In this first situation, the principal at the school where you provide prevention services tells you about a friend who has an uncle who is newly in recovery. This person wants to give back to the youth by telling his story at the school. When asked your opinion, what do you say? Although there are many ways you can address this situation, one might be the following. Remember the CSAP strategies. This would be considered information dissemination, and information dissemination alone is not effective. This would also be a scare tactic, and we know that those aren't effective for long-term behavior change. Explain to the principal that you appreciate this person's desire to give back and that you'd like to work with him to implement more effective programming. Tell him that his input would be invaluable and that he could help with planning. This shows that you value the person while staying away from ineffective prevention. In the second situation, you have a youth coalition that has worked diligently to create an effective prevention activity surrounding prom time. The school resource officer asks if she can bring a crashed car and do a mock crash to show the dangers of drunk driving. How would you handle this? One way to approach a situation is to talk to the school resource officer about scare tactics. Explain that the mock crash is counter to what the youth coalition really wants to achieve. You might even have them tell her. You can compromise if you want by having the crashed car visible, but without the actors making it a mock crash. Include strategies that can incorporate the car and making it a piece of skill building. One final situation you may end up in is that the school wants to bring in a professional football player to talk to the students. They're planning to use a large amount of their budget to pay for this person. So how can you make this more effective? First, please check this person out. Make sure that this player is appropriate first and foremost. Check social media and the internet. Students will check and they will find all the things that may be out there about this person. If the person checks out, explain how this is less effective because it is information dissemination only. Ask how you can improve the effectiveness. One idea might be to work with the player to create discussion points to be used after the talk in the classrooms. This could include skill development, such as talking about ways to reduce stress through sports or art activities. So what are some other ways to incorporate effective prevention? These would be some ways if you are looking at environmental strategies. We like to use our acronyms, and this one can be seen as CAMP: community norms, access and availability, media messages, and policy and procedures. Community norms. For example, you might challenge your school district to use data in a positive way. Push out positive data points to shape community norms in a positive way. We hear all the time that students will say, everybody's using, but the statistics don't show that. Make sure that everyone realizes that. For access and availability, you can address that in relation to where your school is located. Do an environmental scan. An environmental scan can include going to retailers to see what alcohol or drugs are available, where they're available, what advertising they have, and what kind of procedures they have in place to check IDs. Media messages can include messages that your schools are putting out via Twitter, especially around peak times like homecoming, prom, graduation, spring break. And policies and procedures. Know what your school's drug policy is. Is it any good? How can you help them create a strong, comprehensive prevention policy? What about any curriculum they have? What is your school using as far as health curriculum? What are the health teachers using for activities? Make sure they aren't using scare tactics in the classroom like drug goggles. Working through some of these effective prevention activities will help your community show that it's available for the effective prevention and not into ineffective prevention. Let us know if you have any questions about any of this. Thanks, and have a great day.